Hey there, and welcome to the Brittany Wheeler Show. Join Brittany as she interviews incredible people whose stories will uplift you and remind you the life you long for is just ahead. Buckle up for an inspirational ride to your best life. Take it away, Britt.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Brittany Wheeler Show. My name is Brittany Wheeler, and I'm the host of the show. Shocker, with the name there. I've been really learning that I have spent most of the first 2 seasons not introducing myself. So you're welcome for the introduction. I am really looking forward to today's conversation. It is honest. I'm doing the math in my head. It's 13 years in the making, and how special and just an honor it's going to be that I get to share him with you, that I get to share his stories with you and get to help steward the gift that he is to many people. I'm going to wait no time to introduce because I think our conversation is going to be really powerful, and just be ready to share. If it's your first time listening, welcome and buckle up. If it's your 10th, 20th, 60th, you know the drill, and you know you're going to leave inspired and better than you came. So my guest is a husband, a father, a grandfather, a friend, a horse farmer. He's a pillar in the Franklin Pierce University community. He's a leader, a visionary, and an outdoor enthusiast. And he recently is a recipient in the past couple of years of buying an iPhone. Most of the time I knew him, he only owned a flip phone. So this is a big deal for anybody that knows my guest, friend and leader, and just someone that's been an incredible influence in my life. Please welcome Doug Carty to the Brittany Wheeler Show.
Thank you. I'm very humbled and grateful to be here today. And thank you for thinking of me.
You're welcome. I think the timing of this is not a coincidence, and it's a really great opportunity to get to have a conversation with you about you. And that's not often that happens. That definitely did not happen when I was at Pierce. And I think there's a lot of people that connect their experience at Franklin Pierce with you and their memories and their time. And I think it's really special that we're going to get to give the gift to many alumni and many students who get to actually hear your story and hear your heart, and maybe haven't had the opportunity to do so. So that's what I'm looking forward to for this.
Yeah, me too. The one thing about working at the institution for as long as I have, and people ask me that question periodically, like how do you stay at one place for so long? And I really can always come back to the same thing over and over. It's just the energy that all the students bring year after year. They keep me motivated, they keep me young, they keep me engaged, and I'm always learning fun and new things, both positive and negative. But for a person like me, the opportunity to really engage with so many different people and so many different walks of life has really been incredibly beneficial to me as well. So to that end, it's happy to see you all these years later in person, and know that you're doing well and thriving and doing your thing.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to take the audience back for a minute, because this part of the segment I love, which is I give my guests the opportunity to share either a story of us, how we've met, or if they don't really know me, why they said yes to the podcast. So you can choose which of those three you want to answer. But I love this because a lot of times sometimes I'm interviewing close friends. And then sometimes I'm interviewing people I've never met before. And it can be really awkward if you're listening to a podcast and people have never met. You're like, how did this happen? Like, the audience can have a harder time of connecting and feeling invited into the conversation. So I love passing it to my guests to really set the platform for our conversation of the why, the how, the what. So I'll let you, and you haven't signed an NDA, so this is okay. You can share whatever you feel is best.
Thanks. Well, I mean, so in brief, at this time when we were crossing paths, I was the director of Raven Recreation at Franklin Pierce University. And probably at that point, maybe a third to midway through my career here. So at that point, also just really getting the hang of it. If there are alums in here who were in the first couple iterations of my professional career, they might have a different opinion of me, but I did figure it out, and I appreciate your all of their grace in the meantime while I was working my way to becoming a young and proficient professional in some level of student engagement. But Brittany worked for me in our rec facility, the Bubble, which is kind of the main hub for all of our student programming at the institution. lots of traffic flow in there. So those people at the front desk where she worked definitely see a lot of faces, definitely have to bring a personality of their own to the table. And you certainly did, Brittany, when you worked there. Um, you know, I'll use the story. I know we talked about it ahead of time. I just, as seniors are graduating, they tend to be a little more relaxed, and I don't know if they feel comfortable about me or being about me, or maybe slipping up or just being themselves. But on this particular occasion, I remember walking in to the facility, and there was Brittany behind the front desk, and it was spring weekend. Now, if you don't know what spring weekend is at Franklin Pierce, it's an unsanctioned senior or upperclassmen party that typically happens at one of the upperclassmen living areas. And they have all sorts of traditions that they do that are not, they're well thought through. They're just not great ideas in terms of the amount of alcohol and such that is consumed.
Correct.
Anyway, right. Yeah. Yes. You
The
understand.
heart is there, but yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, good on them for putting an event together. But maybe, it's mostly illegal.
Yes. Yes.
So, but anyway, so on this particular weekend, to assign a senior or an upperclassman to work at the bubble, I learned after our experience that maybe it's not a great idea. I should, let the seniors maybe go down and hang out and try to assign freshmen or sophomores to this role, because I don't have to be concerned as much. But I remember coming into the desk that particular day, Brittany, and there you were at the desk, and you were happy and jovial as always, always a pleasant person to interact with, always upbeat, outspoken as well. And now I see this is where you've landed. It makes sense. But I couldn't help but notice the small vessel of alcohol that was stuffed into your shirt, and trying to remain appropriate as a professional because it was in a precarious position, but of course also not being able, but also having to kind of call it out to be like, let's consider what is happening right now. Now, in one respect, it was not open, and you were not trying to drink it at the front desk, which was good, because that might have squandered a reference from you in future years. But it was a misstep, and and I just. But here's the thing: my job here. Most of my colleagues get it. Some don't. Right? They get frustrated. We work with 18 to 22-year-olds, and they lament that why are they still doing these things, and why are they still breaking this, and why are they still acting this way? And I'm like, well, you have to recognize they're not the same 18 to 22-year-olds that they were 5 years ago. It's a whole new batch.
Yeah.
So the cycle continues year to year. And so one of the things you learn as a professional in this role, and what I learned, in experiences like this with Brittany was, let's have a conversation about it. This does not need to be a career ender at our facility. It's a student job, and I appreciate that. But what's the lesson here? What's the takeaway? And how do we move forward? And frankly, for my part too, after you went on to graduate, of course, there was no judgment or ill will towards that particular scenario. You try to take people at their face value, and you move them along and hope they do well, and you've done great. So that was the one thing that kind of stuck out of my head in terms of a story of our interaction. Of course, I did know you on the rugby field. We had many conversations because your aunt was also the director of human resources. And so trying to, listen to different aspects of you were often a student mouthpiece. The students had feedback, and I always appreciate that. I don't, when students find administration intimidating and they don't want to tell people like what's going on, it doesn't allow us opportunity to change. Yeah. And as a student, I remember you distinctly being one of those few that would certainly bring your opinion to bear, whether it was solicited or not. I was going to get it, and I'm grateful for it, because all of those small tidbits definitely shaped the way that we that I do things and the way that, that we should do things. So anyway, it was obviously at that point, it was fun working with you. And so yeah, here we are now, all these, what'd you say, 13 years
13
now?
years. Yeah.
Wow. That is a long. So what was your grad year?
2012.
2012. Yeah. So 2012 was just about
And
11 years
literally
into
we graduated May 12th. So we would have graduated 3 days ago, 13 years.
oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
But you graduated in the sun, right? It was a sunshiny day.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It rained this year,
Mm,
which made it interesting, but we did it. It was
yeah.
good.
Yeah, the year
So
that we graduated, it was so sunny. Everybody was burnt. Like
yeah.
it was, yeah, it was good that it was sunny. Obviously, I would much rather have graduated with sun than rain. But yeah, thank you for sharing that story. I think that what I'm grateful for is that I was a example of how you could be better as well. And I'm an example of like, hey, don't bring a nip to work. And if you don't know what a nip is because you're not from the Northeast, it's a shooter, whatever, vodka, tequila. I don't remember what it was.
I don't remember either.
I don't remember. Yeah. But I do remember being there. And I think, yeah, I was like, all right, well, this is the job. But, I think I was probably a little annoyed as well that I wasn't down with my peers. So it's fair, but also just, don't drink on the job. I think that's also a really fair ask as well. And yeah, we had a lot of overlapping and a lot of time, whether it was the bubble or rugby. And also I want to set the scene for the audience because like I just wasn't, uh, carrying nips around all the time. Doug came into work on a Saturday. Okay. His job mostly outside of events was Monday through Friday. However, most Saturdays on spring weekend, there wasn't really any huge activities planned. So he surprised me by coming into work on a Saturday. This was not a Tuesday afternoon. And the bubble was also very quiet. I feel very convicted to defend myself. It was a very quiet day. There was not many like outside patrons and all the students were participating in other things. And so most of them were not working out. So it was quiet, but yeah, that's a great memory of me. There's a lot of Franklin Pierce, guests come on and share stories that are just hilarious. Things that like Kevin Baca shared, our first introduction was me making him a milkshake during the summer when I worked for you junior year.
Mm-hmm.
And just things you don't remember. It's just fun stuff.
Right.
Takes it back.
I'm just grateful that I remember a story.
Yeah.
I've had over 1,000 employees at this point working for me, and especially in recreation. And I'm glad that I can remember at least a story about them. Whether I can remember a story easier about them than I can remember their names half of the time. So in your case, I remember your name because you continue to be involved
Yes.
outside of the once you graduated. So we
Yes.
appreciate that too.
And the mouthpiece didn't change, right? Like I've
No.
refined, I've grown, I've learned when my voice is necessary. And now in a platform like this, I get to let other voices, right? So we're kind of flipping the whole narrative of that mouthpiece in a sense of what I was like in college. Well, I mean, definitely I look back, and during those moments of advocating and things like that, yeah, there was a lot of passion behind what I said.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important that you're someone that I look back to who didn't belittle that passion, right? Like you would tell me things couldn't happen or that we don't have the money for it or try again, but it wasn't a target of me, right? And what I was bringing to the table or how much I cared, because those were actually the same reasons that the women's rugby program moved in the 4 years that I was there, was the passion, was the commitment, was, the leadership behind that. And I think that there are a lot of leaders, particularly men sometimes, that can get overwhelmed by that personality that I have. And I've had leaders, even a recent boss in 2021, who just wouldn't embrace the giftings and been like, hey, how can we take this passion and like really use it for something good? How can we help to grow her instead of belittle her and make her feel that this is a bad thing, that this is, not going to add value to our institution? So yeah, I'm grateful for that because I think it could have been easy to be like, oh gosh, Brittany, like take a minute, will you please? You didn't do that. You never made me feel that way.
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of stories like yours where, it's people in positions of administrative roles, can just be dismissive of it, but it's not helpful. And back to what I talked about with the energy, right? Um, when someone is passionate about something, I feel that passion. And I'm like, I want to, jump on and be part of this somehow,
Yeah.
whether it's guiding it or just letting it go the way it sits. But to slap it down, I've been a big proponent. Uh, some of my colleagues in higher education, generally speaking, or across the board in any business or operation, they have a focus on one specific thing, and they stay with the blinders on, and they operate in a vacuum. And those are things pretty early on that I realized were not the way to do things. You need help. No one ever does anything alone. No one ever has success by themselves. Some people might be figureheads for that success, but they didn't get to that point by themselves. They had a ton of help. And so, in your case, to take your mouthpiece and listen to what you have to say and really try to feel where you're coming from and gain your perspective and guide it or just listen and be someone who's going to listen that's really important. And it's really important to me. So, people like you, I'm glad, you helped over the early parts of my career, to shape some of my decision making, the way that I perceive things and the way I wanted to work with future generations.
Yeah.
I mean, students are very different now than when they were when you were an undergrad. But one of the things I do pride myself on, frankly, is that I am someone that they can come to.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and at least be heard.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting that as we have chatted over, the last over a decade and just been in different scenarios together, whether it was coming back for a wedding or working with the alumni board, what I've come to realize is that we are not that different, at least in our younger years. I feel like there is that same fire and passion that you have for the things that matter to you and this outspokenness. And so that's probably why it was a safe space, is because I didn't realize it then, because you were coming from a place of authority, but also discernment that I hadn't gotten to yet. Right. But in your own way, amongst your peers, amongst those that are around you, you were a Brittany, but several years older in your own growth and career. And so I think that's a really sweet sentiment that we get now be like, okay, so now we've come 10 years and we've both grown, and what's to come next, where we both can, leverage this passion for good. And I think the first step is this story, is being able to let the let the Frankel Pierce community get to hear your heart and what matters to you, and get to know you a little bit better, and the man behind all the space that you've created and the opportunities that you've helped students to achieve. So, yeah.
Thinking of your aunt in HR, being outspoken can sometimes land you there. And I think it has a couple times, but I don't think it was during her career. So I think we avoided me having to sit in the hot seat and explain why I had a very strong opinion about something.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you know,
Hey.
I always say to people, I'm like, when I have a strong opinion, you might not like how I put it out there, but please tell me where it's wrong.
Good.
If it's just a perception of attitude, then that's something I can work on. But is the point incorrect? And then, we'll have a discussion from there.
Yeah.
So
And that's the reason why you're a pillar, right? Is because you're also willing to say things and challenge, and in a constructive way. I think there's a lot of people right now in the world challenging things to challenge them out of a place of trying to deceive and trying to belittle. But you can walk away, you can say no, you can break off, you can also call up in a way this isn't okay, but there's some good things here. We could do better. And I think that that's missing in the narrative and in the voices of a lot of people trying to make change right now, is they're doing it at a cost of the infrastructure or the integrity of people. And that's just not the way to go about making change.
right.
So
No,
let's,
great.
I want people to get to know you. And I'm excited to
Okay.
get to know some of these things. Tell us share with us what was like growing up. What was your childhood? Let's take us back to young Doug.
So I was I'm the middle son of three brothers.
Okay.
We're all very close in age. My older brother is a year younger, and my younger brother, who's passed away now, it was a year younger. Um, and we were Navy brats. So if you're unfamiliar with the term, my father was in the Navy, and that meant that every 2 years we uprooted and we traveled. Some of my first memories in my childhood were living in Virginia Beach because he was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. From there, I had the opportunity. He was transferred abroad, so we lived in Gaeta, Italy, which inspired some of my future interests, really. When you go from suburban Virginia, a lot of ranch homes made of brick, the architecture is very similar, to all of a sudden you're living in a villa overlooking Sarapo Beach, with apricot trees in your front yards and fig trees and the smell of honeysuckle, in the spring. It tends to make you a little more aware, like, the world is a different place. Um, I as a young kid, I soccer was my sport. I really enjoyed that. I still play to this day in a men's league. I started at 4. I learned very quickly that American soccer was not very good as compared to Italian soccer, because when we did get to play local teams, it was embarrassing. Um, but I was also very young, at that age, I was 6 and 7 years old. But anyway, from there back to the States, we came to Rhode Island. That's where I learned about bullying for the first time. I walked into school, the Oliphant Grade School in Middletown, Rhode Island, and I was king of the hill because over in Italy, in first and second grade, I had like 12 people in my class, and they were all my friends, and they all liked me, and I all liked them, and there was no problems. And I remember walking into school in Rhode Island, and this kid got down on his knees in front of me, and I'm like, what's he doing? And his friend shoved me from behind over him, and I fell to the floor, and of course my books scattered, and it was like day one indoctrinations. And it was the first time actually in my young life that I felt fear in a social environment. I was like, what is this? I was always like well-liked. But I learned from that. I still made plenty of friends. That was the one thing about moving every 2 years. You worry a little bit about the social dynamic. But what's interesting is people tend to gravitate to the new people, the new guy, in both positive and obviously negative ways. But lived in Rhode Island for those 2 years until my father retired from the Navy. My mother was a school teacher during this whole time. Which is meant when I got in trouble in the school, I got sent to my mom in the school, which is always a bummer. But I love to be outside even at that young age. I love to explore. I gave my parents a heart attack once. I did that. One story, we were over in, I don't remember where we were, but it was a ski area village. I don't know if I was in Switzerland. We traveled while we were in Europe to take advantage. And I remember going to my father, who was taking a nap. I'm like, hey, Dad, can Craig and I, my younger brother, go down to this stream and, check it out? And my father's like, yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Well, we went. My father woke up. He had no recollection that I had asked, right? And so my brother and I were like playing in this stream. And I remember walking back, and this guy drives up to us and is like waving us, and he's speaking in Italian, like waving, or a foreign language, waving us into the car. And we're like, no, stranger danger. So I knew enough, to like not get in the car. But he was trying to bring us back to my parents. And I remember getting back to my mom, and she was like in tears because somebody had said there's a well out back, and they must have drowned in the well. Like somebody told her this, like they must have drowned in the well, and and so of course they were like heartbroken, but also like when they saw us, like, oh my gosh, here they are, like angry, but And I'm like, what did I do wrong? I asked Dad.
Yeah,
He's like, no, you didn't. I asked Dad. I said, we're going down to the stream. And, so that exploring piece, as we get further along, you'll appreciate more. But that exploring piece got me in a little bit of trouble back in my early days. But it's something I like to do. I was always, I am still always curious. I love new experiences. We finally ended up in in New Hampshire. That's where my parents settled. They bought some property overlooking the lake, and they wanted to build their family compound, the family home. It didn't work out the way we wanted to. I learned a lot about construction, right? Because my father ended up firing the contractor at one point because he didn't want to do things the way that my father wanted to, which was build it to like code. So, so in the 5th grade, I'm hanging off the 3rd story roof tied to like a makeshift seatbelt webbing with some shackles from the Navy, some rigging to like put on the we put the roof on the house when I was in the 5th grade, and I learned how to do plumbing and electrical in junior high. And but I really enjoyed, while my brothers, I always said there were 3 of us. So my older brother, who's a former he's a naval captain, retired now, but he's literally a rocket scientist, right? He has his master's in aeronautical engineering. So he was good at like the plumbing and the electrical. And my younger brother, who is very artistic and at one point, owned his own art studio and things like that. Not as and he was a collector of art, he did create some of his own. But he was the one who would like to paint inside the house, so he would paint. I hated painting. Yeah. But I landed on landscaping. That was my big thing. So my father bought me a sickle bar mower and taught me how to use it. And so I spent a lot of my days outside in the summers, even in the winters, I think that was the big draw for me, just being out there, experiencing nature, experiencing other things. So I lived up in that area, all the way till I graduated high school. And because of my experience in Italy, I was very interested in architecture. That was my thing. I was creative. I'd been in creative competitions all through high school. I'd won some creative competition scholarships. And I'm like, I want to be an architect. I can create these amazing structures, right? But what I didn't realize that when I finally got into school, I went to Arizona State. Young Doug went to Arizona State. My father desperately wanted me to go to the Naval Academy for 2 reasons. One, he thought it would teach me discipline because he said I didn't have any. And 2, I think it was free if you went there, right?
One of his sons at least went. Did your older brother go to the Naval Academy?
Yes, my older brother did go to the Naval Academy. And actually, that's part of the reason why I didn't want to go, because when I watched him go through like plebe summer and he's like up like this and people are screaming in his face, I'm like, I wouldn't stand there and tolerate that.
I was going to say, I don't think it would have ended well. Based on your personality, it would not have ended well.
Yeah. So I went at my school, I still wanted, architecture was my jam. So, or so I thought. So I applied to ASU and University of Southern California and Roger Williams in Rhode Island. They all had really good architecture programs at that particular time. Got into USC and ASU, toured ASU and USC. Sorry, I apologize. Somebody walked by. I always wave. It's just a force of habit. I toured USC actually the day before the Rodney King riots.
Wow.
That was back in 1992. And that's where the police had arrested and beaten a black man at a traffic stop very badly. And I think what happened is the legal system let the officers off, and the Los Angeles area just erupted in violence over this. So I remember leaving the campus and landing at Arizona State and then turning on the news and watching the restaurant that I'd eaten breakfast at burn to the ground from people like destroying it. And I'm like, wow. Now, at that time, I was young and I wasn't taking the gravity of the situation. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm not going to USC. That didn't make sense because ASU is all palm trees and, not quite as, it was urban, but not quite as urban. So, but unfortunately, I faltered academically there. Believe it or not, I was the only one on my floor who did not go on academic probation in my freshman dorm. We had a good time. And that's probably part of the reason why I didn't. And there were so many distractions for me, and I was certainly easily distracted. And I certainly wanted to engage in everything. Not party. I didn't party, but I definitely wasn't doing my homework as well as I could have. And I'm not saying I don't party because like, I don't want people to know I partied, but I actually didn't really party in college. But, I would be out hiking in the desert once again, or I would drive out in my friend's like 1977 van and into the middle of the desert and just look up at all the stars. And it was, amazing. So that underlying theme of, experiencing new things and being outside was always kind of with me. And then, college-wise, I felt that architecture wasn't going to work out for me. I always said that I could design an epic building, but I could never make it stand. So in other words, I was good at the creative part, but the math and the physics that I needed, I didn't do well at that point in my life. Still not my favorite, but I can pass a statistics class pretty much no problem now. So, but back in the day, not so much. But anyway, I like to tell people that my father used to call me Doug the Drift, right? Because I was just drifting through life trying to figure it out. I never had a plan. I didn't know what I was doing. I kind of had fragments of plans throughout life, but didn't really have something nailed down. So I did. I drifted. And what I tell people is I wandered the desert for 7 years. And that's just a metaphor for living in the Phoenix metro area.
Okay.
I didn't actually,
But I think that's a great hook. And you should just don't even tell them about the Phoenix metro area. Just be like, I wandered the desert for 7 years.
Yeah. Then they're like, oh, is
Tell
that
us more.
biblical? I'm like,
Yeah.
kind of. I wasn't fasting. I wasn't, surfed through, various jobs, retail, got into, and I was always elevated into leadership roles. And that was another thing I wanted. Like once I got into a job, I wanted to do it well, and I wanted to aspire for something more, and not just be like somebody in the back seat, like just spinning my wheels and just going through the motions. I'm like, how do we get better at this? How do we get more? How do I get more responsibility? I always craved responsibility. So managed a retail shop, an exotic reptile shop, actually, lots of snakes and lizards. And I have plentiful scars to prove it. Most have faded by now, but I have some stories for maybe a different time. And then I got into the restaurant industry, and that taught me more about customer service and what that looked like and how people reacted in different scenarios. And I really feel like that helped me a lot, actually, in the higher education front.
Yeah.
Some people don't come in with a customer service background, and they don't appreciate or understand why people are asking for things. They get annoyed. They don't see it as like, how can I serve you? How can I better you? They just see like, why are you asking me this dumb question?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I was, not a traditional student where most 18 to 22-year-olds have 22-year-old, you've graduated from school and you're going to grad school, et cetera, et cetera. No, I was in the job force, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do with myself. I dabbled in a little community college, but life wasn't really great. It was okay, but I wasn't making moves. One time what kind of changed for me is what kind of got me into the adulting, I guess, so to speak, was, I was on my buddy's couch surfing for a couple of weeks because I was between leases, and he had an issue of, I think it was Backpacker magazine sitting on his couch. So I was reading through it because I enjoyed that stuff.
Yeah.
And there was an ad in the back for a small community college in Western Maryland that offered an adventure sports degree. And I'm like, well, this seems what I like to do, because while I'm out in the desert, I'm hiking, I'm mountain biking, I'm thinking about, I'm tubing down the Salt River. Maybe this is something I want to do. So I did. I toured it, and I went, and a year and a half later, I'd zoomed right through the criteria of the associate's program. I'd transferred credits, of course, and I loved it. And I graduated really quickly. And from there, I hopped on my mountain bike. My parents took my car and all my possessions home to Meredith, New Hampshire, and I rode my bicycle from Maryland back to New Hampshire. With 11 days it took me. I brought a tent, and I hurt myself because I didn't train very well for it. I just said, I'm going to send it, right? We're going to get it done. But I made it. And actually, I ended my trip in Keene at the roundabout. If you're familiar, in Keene, New Hampshire, there's a roundabout.
In downtown? Like right
downtown. Right downtown.
Okay.
Yeah, right downtown.
Okay.
I had actually started to ride out of Keene. It was still 100 miles to go to my parents' house, but I needed to be on a flight the next day to Chicago for my then girlfriend's brother's graduation.
Okay.
So I called him. I said, I don't think I can make the 100 miles in a day. So can you come get me? And, so 2 hours later, my parents showed up and collected my stuff, and I went back and did my thing. And what happened, and at that point, I didn't realize how close I was to then Franklin Pierce College, and I had no aspirations to work at Franklin Pierce College or Franklin Pierce University. I graduated with my degree in adventure sports, and I was going to go up north, and I was going to be a whitewater rafting guide. I was going to be a rock climbing guide. I was going to be a mountaineering guide because I had all those skill sets now. And I was going to do that by day, and I was going to bartend by night. That was my plan. But believe it or not, what landed me at Franklin Pierce, my high school classmate of mine who I'd lost touch with, last I knew he was out at Cornell working, or Ithaca College working. But what I didn't know is he was the director of recreation at Franklin Pierce then college. And so when I was home at my parents talking to his parents about what I had done and where I was doing, I just, bumping into people I knew at town. Next thing you know, he's calling me and he's like, "Hey, Doug," he's like, "we're trying to start an outdoor program here. You might be interested in being a grad assistant." I'm like, "I don't know what that means." He's like, "Well, you get your master's degree." And I said, that would be nice. But I said, I don't even actually have my bachelor's
Finish my bachelor's. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have that yet. And so he's like, "Well, let me figure it out and I'll call you back." So I interviewed. Obviously, I had a very strong background in outdoor recreation at that point. And they hired me. But they didn't have enough my first year at Franklin Pierce University, I made $11,000.
Holy Hannah.
I had two jobs. I had two bosses, two vice presidents. I worked so they're trying to figure out like, okay, how do we get this guy a living wage, right? Well, he can't just be here as a GA for $5,000 and not have a place to live. So let's see if Res Life will accommodate him and he can be a resident director as well, part-time. So I interviewed with Res Life and they were a little hesitant to hire me. I'm like, I can identify a beer can from 100 feet away, like the brand.
You identified a nip. You're fine. You were equipped.
Yeah, exactly. I said, exactly. I know. I can assess people's sobriety pretty quickly from experience, So I think, sure. Do I have experience working with students? No, I had zero. Do I have a background in Res Life? No, I don't. Was I ever an RI? No, I was not. But I'd like to, see what else I can bring to the table. So they hired me. So I was in the mornings, I spent in Res Life my first year here. And then I went and in the afternoons, I went down to the Bubble, our rec center, and ran the outdoor program. And I was working like 80 hours a week because I was running trips every weekend. I was taking students rafting and rock climbing, and ice climbing and biking. And I was taking them all over the place, but it was fun. And I appreciate it. And then of course my role is, we're way past young Doug, but I'm just giving you got the whole story now of how I ended up where I am.
It is. So there's so many things that and I have another Franklin Pierce question that I'll ask, but it is so cool. And I hope that everybody that's alumni, whether it's from 2012, 2010, 2008, whatever, I just feel like particularly maybe 2015 and younger, maybe not, but getting to know you at the age that you were when you were leading me and then to hear all your story, it is the coolest thing ever because two things come to mind. Number one is just seeing how everything was lining up for you to be equipped for this position. Was so insane. Even your 7 years in the desert was equipping you to be able to handle this job. But then also to know now that you weren't that different than me or that half of my friends in just all of it, right? All of your tenacity and no, this is not enough. And I'm going to challenge the limits. And I'm not going to settle for just because someone else told me to. And these are all themes that I know I've experienced personally. I think there's a lot of Franklin Pierce alum that I've graduated within a few years on either side also are that way. And maybe that is something that unofficially gravitates people to Franklin Pierce is like this. We didn't really know it, but like we weren't going to settle. We're not people that are just, ordinary. We're going to be rhyme or reason. And I think I'm seeing that personally of how and what alumni are being activated towards and what they're doing for the good of the communities and just being a little bit different enough to make change, right?
Right.
And to have an impact wherever they land. I mean, some incredible things. And so it is a cool story to also know that like all of this was happenstance, right? Like this was, and I wonder how many. I should poll a lot of alumni. Franklin Pierce was not my first choice. Franklin Pierce, when I got into Keene State. I did not walk the campus. I had toured Cortland, SUNY Cortland, SUNY Oneonta. SUNY Oneonta was my number one choice. And my mom was like, just my Aunt Sharon, who I call Rara. She's like, Rara works there. Go and I want you to just go and take a look at it. Like she says it's great. And so I went on principle of appeasing my family. And what happened was I fell in love with campus. I felt like I belonged there. I just felt at home. And I think that it more than not, like that's how our students, feel. And that's how my peers have felt. And so for you to also have a very similar story of like, wow, like I discovered myself, I found myself, I fell in love with the community and the surroundings. And, but it wasn't my plan. I never planned on being at Franklin Pierce. I think that is incredibly cool.
Yeah, I really feel like I always tell incoming students for open houses, I ask them, where else are you applying? And they tell me their list. And I said, that's great. I said, at the end of the day, what you just said, Brittany, resonates is if pick the one that feels like it's going to be like your home. It's going to be your next home. I said, if you don't feel at home there, don't go. If you don't feel at home here, don't come here.
Yeah.
I said, you need to set yourself up for some level of success. And so, find your home and find your people. And if it's us, that's fantastic. And we want to help you. And I think a lot of people appreciate that
Yeah.
they're, given permission that they can just figure it out for themselves. So,
Yeah.
because I know that there is a lot of pressure and such from parents, especially to make sure that people, or their kids go to the right places or,
Right.
have the right financial aid package, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah. It's interesting that you said that about the home piece, because I don't know if you knew this, but when I was like you, I was actively involved, as you know, at Franklin Pierce. What didn't Brittany Wheeler do? And one of the things is I was a tour guide for admissions.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point I would I would have a small group of a family, maybe 2 families, max 3. And I remember I would usually do this around the end of the tour or like maybe at the beginning, but it was usually beginning or end, where I would use the analogy of picking a college is like naming a child. Like literally, I would say this, and I would say that, sometimes you don't know what the child's name is going to be. You don't know. And sometimes you do. Sometimes the name has been picked out for, weeks and weeks and weeks, but you won't know until that baby is in your arms. And I would say that all the time as it relates to Franklin Pierce. Like sometimes you didn't know. Like you had this idea of where you were going to go and what you're going to do. And then you get there and you see this child in your arms, you see Franklin Pierce in front of you and you're like, wait, no, that's either it or it's not it. Right. But it was very much like, that was just such a crazy analogy that at 21, that's what I was giving these young kids.
Yeah.
But it's true. Like that's how I felt about picking a college, is you don't know until you actually get there, until you experience it. And it's really cool to know that Franklin Pierce had the same effect on you.
Did. And I really thought, when I first got into this place, I thought I'll be here 2 years and out, 2-3 years and call it good and move on. But like I said, the students have a certain, first of all, I had opportunities, the university allowed, recognized that I was wanted more, and I became assistant director and director pretty quickly, and then held on to a bunch of committee roles and other roles and started to expand my interest into other areas to try and, help with those efficiencies. And So what I thought was going to be a short piece of my life is now 24 years later. Here I am.
Yeah.
And at this point, I remember my wife and I talking about this somewhat recently, about what's next. And she's like, at this point, Doug, you might as well just retire there. I mean, why would you want to,
Yeah. Seriously.
why would you want to go? I mean, our roots are here, our family's here,
Yeah.
why do you want to go anywhere else? So
Yeah.
we'll see. But, it's interesting to think about spending most of your working life in one place.
Yeah. Well, I think higher ed provides a really unique experience. I tried it myself, and for a lot of the reasons why you and I have a lot of similar foundational pieces, it didn't work for me because I asked for forgiveness and not for permission. And at the time, I was working at a faith-based institution. I probably could have gotten away with it at Pierce, but at a faith-based institution, there's a lot of unwritten rules, and I didn't fit the bill. And so, while I made some beautiful progress and I left an incredible legacy, and God vindicated me at my time there, um, I was a force, right? And that can be really overwhelming in higher ed when the same things happen over and over again every single year, like clockwork, right? And when you want to make change for the better, it can sound and feel like you are coming at people's identities and who they are. And so I'm grateful for that experience. I learned a lot. But I know that for you on the other end of having that tenure, you can still make change and progress. There's still hills and there's always challenges to it. But you being able to, be in a place like higher ed where every 4 years the cycle changes, right? So, you can make some change in 4 years. Students change every year, and there's this sense of renewing that can happen. So while it is been 24 years, there has been so much change that has happened as a result of that.
And I feel like I'm a sun in a solar system at this point with my colleagues too, because I've been here for 5 presidents. I've had 5 supervisors.
Yeah.
So when you talk about change, one of the things I like to say when something doesn't go my way, when I don't get someone to listen in on a thought that I might have, I just wait. And then the new person comes and I plug the idea to them.
Yeah.
And sometimes it has success and sometimes it doesn't. And then I wait again. And so and by the way, just to clarify that comment, it's not meant to like drive me forward, but like to better the student experience. If some area is kind of not really feeling it the way that I think they should from a benefit of having all the feedback from students, then I want to definitely let them know, because some people don't like to move to that information. Yeah. So I'll wait till they leave and then play the long game, so to speak, and continue to push it until I finally get it. I had a dean one time characterize me when I got into a negative interaction with him many, many years ago. This is like 2003. And he said, Doug strikes me as the guy who will keep at it until he gets what he wants. And I'm like, well, if I feel strongly enough about it, I will keep asking. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't think, at that point he was selling it as kind of a negative thing of my personality. And and at the time I took it that way. It's like, is this something I need to work on? Am I being too pushy? But then when I see the changes that have been made and the how it impacts the student experience in a positive way as a result, then I'm like, okay, I'm grateful that I'm strong enough to continue to make these pushes for these, for everyone around me.
So good. And also I can relate to that so much around like people have literally said the same thing about me of like, if Brittany wants it to happen, it's going to happen. And I think there's a level for me of discernment and wisdom. And also, like you said, I just got smarter about it. And I mean, for me, my belief with God, I'm like, all right, God, like I'm not going to work hard. If you want this to happen, make it happen. And I'll just be over here. And I also have leveraged the power of third-party affirmation. And let me tell you, it is real life, because sometimes I think it's a great idea. And instead of me going and tell someone, I'll plant the seed with someone else who will then tell the person that needs to hear it. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, what? That's an incredible idea. And I'll be sitting back being like, wow, that was just a beautiful form of magicianry that I just performed and didn't have to break a sweat. And guess what? things are going to still move and shake in the direction that are necessary. But one of the things I was wondering too is you became a dad while at Franklin Pierce, and to teenagers actually. And so I want to know from your perspective, like how did that help? How did working at Pierce, how did working with you know, rebels like myself at the time help you in raising your children um, outside of off campus?
It's patience was something. As a step parent, I think there are a lot of things in the mix, or especially early on in a relationship. You know, um, I'm grateful that none of my kids ever said to me, "You're not my dad." You know what I mean? Like when I would get upset or frustrated or try to impose some sort of parental guideline, or maybe punishment. They would never say like, "You're not my dad." And I was really happy to be able to get close and bond with them all the way that I did. We had our trying times, certainly. It's stressful becoming a parent, and trying to navigate ex-spouse and how that works, and then the different personalities. I mean, none of my children have the same personality. They're all uniquely special in their own way. I'm very proud of them in many ways, and of course, they confound me in other ways. But working at a university, um, the shenanigans that the students would get into would help me, probably to my own kids' detriment, understand like what they might have been doing that they shouldn't be doing before they knew I knew about it.
Yeah.
But also they all got very good at like calling me, especially if they were at a vehicle accident. They would always call me versus my wife first, because I was such a helper. And they knew that, okay, Doug's not going to yell at me. He's not going to yell at me. He's going to do disappointed dad, but he's not going to yell at me.
Yeah.
And he's going to help me pull my car out of a ditch or, whatever.
Yeah.
And there was that dynamic. But, you know, it is a little different, right? So with college students, I can mentor them and take their some of the things they don't do well, but I still go home at the end of the day, and it's still their thing to work with.
Yeah.
With your own family, you really have to deal with it head on, and you have to keep with it, and it can be harder to do that. So although there is a comparison of how the college students helped temper some of my reactions, there's also still a disconnect on how, or a significant difference in how I would engage with a student in one scenario versus my own child.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it would make sense that working with 18 to 22-year-olds and learning to be patient, it would definitely inform parenting, but it is very different, and we're subtly different and very different in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
I always, when my kids were young, they always thought I owned the bubble. They would come in there and they said, "Oh, don't worry about it. My dad owns the bubble."
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no. I work here. I run this building, but I don't own it. They're like, "No, it's yours, so we can do what we want in here." I'm like, no. So I had to temper a little of that privilege for them occasionally. They're still, my kids got in a little bit of trouble. And it was probably challenging for my staff who had to deal with that, because they're like, do we enforce policy, or are we going to upset Doug because we're yelling at his kids?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yell at my kids. Go ahead, yell at them. But they still wouldn't. But, it's okay. I mean, they're all grown up now. I mean,
you're a grandfather now
I am a grandfather
of a lot of children, not just one or two. I think there's what, 7,
right.
8? Yeah.
Well, it will be 8. We're at 6. It will be 8 very soon. This is recent news, so yay! Everyone on the podcast gets to learn too.
Well, this is coming out several months from now, so the babies will already be born.
Well, actually, so when is she due? I should probably know this. I know she's 13 weeks along. So anyway, with twins. My son's wife, yeah, twins. So it's very
cool.
exciting.
Is this going to be
I
their
know.
second and third, or is this their first?
It'll be her second and third, right? They have one boy, Beckham. He's one.
Okay.
So yeah,
because your youngest is married but has no kids, right?
My youngest is not married.
Not married.
It's my second youngest.
Okay.
Yeah, my oldest and my youngest are not married.
Okay.
My daughter Ashlyn,
yes,
has 5 children, and her daughter finally got her daughter Shay, who's after a year finally trusting me to pick her up and hold her.
It's so sad.
She likes our horses, so I pick her up and walk her down to the barn, and she's always like, eh. She tries to make the neigh sound. It's the cutest sound. It melts me every time.
So precious.
And of course, Beckham, I've already taken him on multiple rides on the riding lawnmower, where it's usually it's Papa's technique to get the children to fall asleep. They definitely fall asleep pretty easily on the riding mower. I don't know if it's because of all the dust they get in their eyes that make them sleepy, or the vibration or whatever. Maybe a mix of both. I don't know if the dust in their eyes is a great thing, but hey, I really try hard at, parenting and grandparenting. I didn't say I was perfect at it. So, but yeah, definitely a family, a growing family. My wife and I love it. We love it that they're all close by.
Yeah.
Jaffrey and Ringe, they live right in town. So they visit us often. My daughter will drop off one of my grandkids at Little League or baseball, and then she'll just come to the house and hang out for his practice while she's waiting, so. And then they want to ride the 4-wheeler, and they want to ride the dirt bikes, and Papa, can you fix this? And Papa, I broke this.
Yeah, because her 4 boys are like active. They are not
very active.
They're not sitters. Yeah.
No, they like, Papa, can we go fishing? Can we go doing this? Can we go, everything? And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I fix a lot of broken things too.
Yeah.
If I can.
I love that.
That's okay.
And I love that also, in this season of life that, getting to raise your kids, but then also getting to now get to be in the fun, adventurous, and getting to have littles around, very, very, very young children. And just feeling this sense of just, I don't know, newness, and just, I don't know. I think grandparenting is fun. And I think that also that you've just gone through a lot in the past several years, and that's something that I want to transition into next. And so I think it's really beautiful and wholesome that your family is getting to surround you, and you're getting to just experience the sweet things that matter to you, right? Which is being outdoors and getting to, and that your family, that your wife, like before you even knew it, right? Before this even happened, like you knew that your wife and her children, like they all were planned for you, and your grandchildren were planned for you, because like to have a papa that like doesn't like doing those things would be a really weird experience, right? Of like, oh, I just like to sit around and play video games. No, like you're a papa that does like to do the things that they love to do. And God is just so good in the plan that he has for us. But I want to go back a little bit to 2022 and just talk about, you were in an incredibly scary accident, life-altering, almost life loss accident, actually. And I mean, I know that it shocked the community for Franklin Pierce, because I mentioned that you were a pillar, and it took minutes and moments for that news to spread to us as alumni that knew you and cared. And how can we be a part? How can we help? Because you had just been such a constant for so many generations of students. And getting to hear your story of the accident and what happened, and getting to hear the after, I think it's just a really beautiful opportunity to share with the audience, because I think that, number one, just to get to hear what happened, but also to get to hear just all of the beautiful blessings that came as a result of that as well. So just kind of talk through what was happening prior to the accident. And then if you want to share what happened, and we can go from there. But yeah, what was life like leading up to the accident?